Oh, Charles, what a beautiful garden you have.
Thank you.
Yes, it's amazing.
Enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, and while you can't see animals, you know that in order for this to work, there are many creatures involved.
Absolutely. We've got hummingbirds, worms, raccoons.
Butterflies, raccoons. Raccoons.
We've got it all.
Yeah.
Even deer sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, that sounds like a community of sorts to me.
It is a community of sorts.
Yeah, an eco-community of sorts. And I can't imagine a better venue for talking to you about what it means to engage in community critically. What does critical community engagement mean? And I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
That's a wonderful idea. It's a topic close to my heart, so let's do it.
Yes. It's something that I've been committed to with my work as well. So I'd like us to start off with the question, what does critical community engagement mean?
Well, I'd like to talk about that as much as possible without jargon.
Love it. Yes.
And so I want to break it down into its components. There are three words in that phrase. I think critical has to do with what the sociologist Irving Goffman always used to talk about. He used to say every situation we go into, whether it's a fieldwork situation or just a regular, everyday situation. So every time we come into a new social situation, there are several questions that usually occur to us as human beings. The first one being, what are these people doing?
Yeah, what's happening?
And then, what do they think they're doing?
Yeah.
It may seem kind of strange to you as you kind of enter the situation. What do they think they're doing? And then that leads to the question, what do I think they're doing?
Oh, self-interrogation.
Yeah, and that leads to the further question, what do I think I'm doing here?
Ah.
And so that's the beginning of what we might call critical awareness, which I would say it's the intersubjective understanding of the complexities of human relatedness. And I don't use the word relationship because that has all kinds of reverberations, other kinds of connotations, but relatedness, just the fact that when we come into a social situation, we are necessarily in connection. We are necessarily in a situation of relatedness to each other. And that involves all kinds of complexities, and from inequalities to power relationships and so on. So that's the beginning of critical awareness.
So that's related a little bit to some of the work that I've done. There's so much about community that may not be immediately visible or audible. There are unknowns, and coming to that place with open-mindedness and humility in assuming that there are funds of knowledge that I can benefit from, that I can learn from.
Okay. Yes, that's where the community, the idea of community comes in to this phrase. Community is not a hard and fast thing. It's not something that endures and is the same over time. It's constantly being transformed as new members come in and as people exit and so on. Community emerges in the context of joint activity.
And you can feel it when it happens, can't you?
You can totally feel it when it happens.
When you're in a space and you're thinking you're doing something, I have to do this in order to get this grade or to get this degree, but when community happens, it's a whole other story that's happening.
Exactly.
That's unfolding.
You suddenly feel like, oh, I like these people.
I'm a part of that family.
I'm a part of this group. I'm a member. I'm part of this community. And that's the wonderful thing about community, is that in the context of joint activity, you as an outsider become part of the community, and that in itself is a transformation of what the community is and is all about.
Yes, well, thank you for that. So I have a follow-up question. What does critical community engagement look and sound like to you?
Well, it can look like a lot of different things. It can look like total chaos.
Uh-huh.
It can look like endless argumentation. Or it can look like a big happy family. It can look like a utopian environment where everybody gets along. It can look like play, or it can look like work. It depends on the context. It really depends in large part on who the people are, what they're trying to do, how different they are from each other, and whether they have different definitions of the situation when they come together. So, I mean, I remember an experience I had in a program called Projeto Clicar, which was a program for street children in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Now, in that program, outsiders would come in and they would say, "This is total chaos. These kids are just yelling and shouting at each other, and are they just playing?" And the educators would say, "No, they're learning all kinds of things. They're learning how to read and write, and they're learning how to use computers." And they said, "Well, do you take them aside and instruct them on how to use the computer?" "No, they teach each other. We are learning with them. We're learning from them," the educators would say, because they teach us what we need to do to work with them on their level and bring them along in ways that help them rather than in ways that we think are good for them.
I can relate to that view, because in community-based literacies, the programming that I've developed with my colleagues in Santa Barbara, the idea is all linguistic resources are welcome. And so what you hear in a community is everything, right?
That's right.
It is ideally everything. And including with our undergraduates, to bring the language that we have, all of our languages, in making sense of this social space and using it as a way of connecting and committing to each other in a social space.
C. Wright Mills wrote an article a long time ago, back in the 1950s. It's called Situated Action and Vocabularies of Motive. Now, all action, all human action is situated. It's historically situated, it's socially situated, it's culturally situated. And different people, when they come in together, they often bring very different vocabularies of motive, ways of expressing what they think they need, what they think they want from this situation. And so what you're talking about is that in many cases, when we come into a community and run an after-school program, we're coming up against very different vocabularies of motive, very different definitions of what the situation is, of what people want out of the situation.
Wow. So it is complex, it's dynamic, but critical community engagement is, in a sense, engaging in a broader sense of life work and life play and
Absolutely.
And all of those
Absolutely.
ways that we connect with one another.
It has to do with all the inequalities, all the power differentials there are in our society that come into play in every situation, every everyday situation that we take part in, and so that's part of our critical understanding, of our critical consciousness. But let's talk about engagement.
Okay.
What do we mean by engagement?
Yeah.
Engagement comes from a French word in the 14th or 15th century, engagé.
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 So fancy.
Yes. Well, it was just an ordinary word back in the 14th, but engagé comes from the root gage, which means pledge or commitment. And so engagé is the verb, which means to pledge to commit to to commit to a community of learners in our case, to commit to over a period of time, to commit one's whole self to a community of co-learners for a period of time. That's what engagement means. And critical community engagement means being mindful of the diverse community that we're entering into, the changing community that we're coming into and will change on our own as we participate with them, and being mindful of the complexities, the differences in meaning, the differences in power that are already there, and working to transform those to create a more powerful collaborative learning situation for everybody involved.
Well, that's wonderful. So critical community engagement is a commitment to be mindful of not just what you see and hear, but what might be right under the surface.
Exactly.
So all of the silences and the hidden knowledge and experiences that could make a community more enriching.
It means keeping close attention to what others are saying and doing, and what they are not saying, and
what they're not saying.
and what they're not doing.
Yeah.
It means being very careful about who you are among the people that you're with.
Right.
And it means being very careful to participate on their terms, and for them to participate on your terms. So there's a coming together, a mutual engagement.
Oh, that's wonderful.